Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.com. Welcome to the show and welcome to another comic chat. So this episode, I will be talking about a bunch of comic books that I read during the month of September 2021, along with one other new thing that I'm going to do here. This is a really long list of books. I'm just going to tell you all the books that I read, and then I'm going to spotlight a few of them, and then at the end I'll touch on just a few other ones, just real quick bits that I have for those particular comic books. And so the comics that I read during that month are Radiant Black Volume 1, Stillwater Volume 1, Something is Killing the Children Volume 3, Star Trek Dead of Honor, which is something that I plan to do on a Center Seat episode in the future, Secret Volume 1, Serial Number 4, The Marvels Number 2, the Stargirl Spring Break Special, Strange Adventures Number 10, the DC Festival of Heroes, the Asian Superheroes Celebration 100-page Super Spectacular one-shot, Batman Catwoman Number 5, X-Men Unlimited Infinity Comic 2021 Number 1. I'm not sure why they have 2021 in the title for that. Anyway, Truth and Justice Numbers 4 and 5, Nightwing Number 78, woohoo! Justice League Number 59, Pepper Page Saves the Universe, which is an OGN that I plan to spotlight in some future episode of the show. Titans United Number 1, New Mutants by Brisson, Flaviano, and Failla, Volume 1. I got some thoughts about that. Later, Immortal Hulk Volume 9, and finally, Killadelphia Volume 1. So quite a lot there that I read during September 2021. But we'll get to those in just a second. Because I want to do something new, and thanks to Peter Rios for the suggestion, creator spotlights. So I get quite a few emails from creators, mostly indie creators, where they would like me to spotlight their new comic book or their Kickstarter, whatever they're doing for their new comic book or their latest issue of a comic book. And so I'm just a one-man show here, and I don't have a lot of time to actually devote to these kinds of things as much as I would like to. In the past, when I first started the blog, before I started podcasting, I would actually review comic books that were sent to me, and I would post those reviews to the website. But I find I don't have as much time as I did when I first started out doing this kind of stuff. And so what I'm going to do here is just give you an introduction to this one particular comic book. It's no longer new, but I'm gonna start spotlighting these creators and their works every once in a while. And the first one here is The Lost Boy, Episode 1, Pan, by Joshua Grant and Mark Rossetti. And so this is about this is a quote from the website diabolicshrimp.com. Kudos to the creators for that particular website name. I think that's actually Joshua Grant's website. Anyway, this comic is a gritty, modern retelling of Peter Pan where Peter becomes a vigilante crime fighter after the death of his best friend. It's sort of in the same vein as The Dark Knight or Daredevil. Mr. Grant has this first issue posted on the website. So if you go to, as I said, Diabolic Shrimp, that's all one word, diabolicshrimp.com/comics, you can read that first issue. And so, like I said, I read that first issue, and it was a very interesting retelling of Peter Pan. And so, if I were someone who were really interested in that particular story, the Peter Pan story, and how someone would reimagine that, I'd be very interested in reading more of this. And so, like I said, you could go read the first issue right now and decide for yourself if you'd like to read that. And but there are 6 issues of season 1 that are available right now, and you can read those by ordering them and reading them on Amazon Kindle. So go check out diabolicshrimp.com/comics. And if you are a creator who happens to be listening to this and you would like me to spotlight your book or books on the show, just send me an email at longboxreview@gmail.com and I will do my best to get those on the show. Okay, here we go with the Spotlight of Comics. I'm going to talk about Radiant Black, Not So Secret Origin Volume 1. Then I'm going to talk about Stillwater Rage Volume 1. Then the Stargirl Spring Break Special, Nightwing number 78. And then I'll end the spotlights with Killadelphia Sins of the Father Volume 1. And then I'll talk about a few other books, 4 other books. So here we go with Radiant Black. So this is from Image Comics. This is by artist Marcelo Costa, with guest artists on issues 5 and 6, Eduardo Ferragamo and Darko Lafuente, and written by Kyle Higgins. Co-writer on issue 6 was Cherish Chen, and we have guest colorists on issues 5 and 6, Natalia Marquez and Miguel Muerto. Rod Fernandez is the color assistant on issue 4, and finally Becca Carey did the letters for all this. Lots of people involved with this one. All right, what is Radiant Black, Not So Secret Origin Volume 1 about? Visionary writer Kyle Higgins and artist Marcelo Costa reinvent superheroes for a new generation. Nathan Burnett has just turned 30 and things aren't great. He's working and failing at 2 jobs. His credit card debt is piling up and his only move is moving back home with his parents. But when Nathan discovers the ethereal cosmic Radiant, he's given the power to radically change his fortunes, unless the cosmic beings who created them succeed in taking them back by any means necessary. Oh, and did we mention there's a Red Radiant who wants Nathan dead? The next must-read comic book series starts here, and this collects Radiant Black issues 1 through 6. So there are 2 books that I'm going to spotlight here where I am regretting, or did regret anyway, not picking up the series in single issues as opposed to waiting for the trade, because I hear for months how good the series is, from people I know personally to people who are tweeting about it and people who are podcasting about it. And so this was one of those series where when I read the original solicitation in previews, I was thinking, ooh, this sounds pretty good. I think I might like this. And I generally like Kyle Higgins' work. I wasn't all that familiar with the artists involved, but the covers I saw looked really cool. Anyway, so it gets me excited to read the issues when they finally are traded, because then I can then sit down and read in a typical trade 5 to 6 issues all at once. So that's nice. That's a nice reading experience. What's not nice, however, is that sometimes, since I'm waiting, I may hear things or I may read things that spoil events, certain story elements in the series before I get to read them. I did hear, with issue 4, there was like this major turn of the story. Fortunately, I was not spoiled by it. In particular, when I was listening to Comic Geek Speak, and Chris Eberly for months was talking about how much he loved Radiant Black, and he was very careful about not spoiling that thing in issue 4, which I will not spoil either. All right, so the cover of this trade includes a poll quote from Robert Kirkman where he says, quote, "The perfect superhero comic for anyone missing Invincible." Which, might come across as a bit self-serving and maybe even perhaps a little smug. But I'm sure there's context here that I don't have. But he's right. Radiant Black, for me, did evoke a similar feeling to when I read Invincible. But instead of following a young man as he discovers his powers, which, he still does in this, but more importantly, it was about discovering his place in the world along with his father in Invincible. We get this slightly older dude, age 30, who lucks into his powers and has to figure out what he's being told about his role as whatever this being he's now become, this powered being he's become. And he's not the only one. So, as the description before says, he encounters a red version of himself, and later we see some other versions. Which, by the way, I thought the whole look of them, while it's still cool, kind of reminded me a little too much of the Power Rangers, with maybe a hint of the, if you think of the emotional spectrum in the Green Lantern books from several years ago, there's a little bit of that at play too. I'll just say that. So, it's all right though. It's not like they're ripping off this stuff. It's just, it's superhero comics. So these kind of things will sometimes appear and reappear over the years. One of the things I did like in this, besides the major change in issue 4, which I know, go read it to find out. There are surprises in, I think, just about every issue, sometimes more than one. And I love how the creative team keeps me guessing from, basically what that black sphere of power that Nathan acquires is exactly, to who the bad guy is in this, the major adversary that they have a run-in with. And more importantly, why does he want to kill everyone? Because there's a few points in there where basically I'm not even sure how to describe it. The cosmic beings that they refer to, although it's kind of weird because in the description they talk about how the cosmic beings are gonna want the powers back, but I'm not sure that I quite got that in this story. What I got was more like with Green Lantern's ring, to go back to Green Lantern. The ring has this artificial intelligence in it. And I think that there's something going on that's similar to that. Not necessarily that the black sphere that Nathan uses to turn himself into Radiant Black, which, by the way, is a name that his best friend in the story comes up with and gives him. So I thought that was kind of cool. The sidekick is his best friend, so to speak. So I think that maybe the sphere is some sort of artificial intelligence or is some sort of conduit to something else. Not really clear on that, actually. So I'm eager to read Volume 2 to figure out or to find out more about this kind of stuff. So there is a cliffhanger in issue 5 involving the major adversary. And I won't say any more about that. There's really not much to say about it, actually. But the story that we've been reading for 5 issues in this just kind of ends. And then issue 6, as a nice way, I guess, to pause the action, but continue the story or the backstory and building the world. We get an entire issue on the Red Radiant. And that's just what I'm calling that character, since we have Radiant Black, or maybe I should say it's Radiant Red. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do with all that, the naming stuff. So, but the red version, it's all about that character. And I really like that story, which has a parallel to something else in the series. For example, here's a couple extra things that I really liked about the series. Extra points for making Nathan a writer who's, is it too harsh to say he's a failed writer? He's not as successful as he wants to be, certainly, but he keeps trying. It really reminds me of when I was writing or trying to create stories in that way. So I really enjoyed, so to speak, how they showed Nathan struggling with his writing. Along with him, there's this scene where I think he's at a coffee shop or someplace. Anyway, he has his laptop, but he's actually trying to compose a story. And this is after I can't remember if it was after or before his encounter with the Red Radiant. Anyway, but he's trying to take advantage of things that are happening in his life now to start crafting a story. And there seems to be some parallels between the story he's writing and the events of issue 6. And it could just be a writer extrapolating based on the what he knows about a situation. But it's really interesting. I'm really curious if we get to see that somehow Nathan was channeling, that he has some sort of connection with the other Radiant. And that's what allowed him to kind of write this story. Anyway, Maybe I'm just making more of it than I should. But I really enjoyed that whole writer aspect of the story. There's even 2 pages of prose of the actual story that Nathan's writing that we get in this. And, some people may say, well, that's 2 wasted pages of a comic book, but I enjoyed it. So I like that a lot. And then also, there are a couple cops that we see in issues 1 and 2. And, I really enjoyed how the cops aren't your typical, draw guns, potentially shoot you first and deal with the consequences later. They're not your stereotypical, jerk cops that we see a lot in superhero comic books. In fact, they actually seek out Nathan for his assistance dealing with the Red Radiant. So I hope we get to see them a little bit more as the series progresses. Okay, on to the next one, Stillwater Rage Volume 1 from Image Comics. This is by Ramon K. Perez, who is the artist, Chip Zdarsky, the writer, Mike Spicer, the colorist, and Russ Wooten, letters. So when I read this, I tweeted out there that, I read this, I have thoughts, and I would talk about them on an episode. And then later, I was reading, preparing for this episode, and I really kind of struggled with this one because I thought that there was more to talk about than there actually was. But I realized I was focusing too much on plot and not enough on the ramifications of what this, I will say, this introduction to this world in Volume 1. What those ramifications are and what they could mean. So, but anyway, so here we are with Stillwater Volume 1. So what this is about, nobody dies in the town of Stillwater. That's not just a promise, it's a threat. Seemingly frozen in time and unable to age, its citizens have learned to exist with the knowledge that they'll live forever. With no one allowed in or out of the town under the threat of severe violence, things seem normal from the outside. But when Daniel shows up in town after receiving a mysterious letter, he'll find out if immortality is a gift or a curse. And this collects numbers 1 through 6. I have to say, I don't know who wrote this introduction or the summary of the book, but come on. He'll find out if immortality is a gift or a curse. I mean, if you can't tell by the cover what this could mean, I don't know. It seems kind of obvious that it's not going to be a gift, especially the way it's written under the threat of severe violence. Come on, you've already played that hand, so why are you trying to be so coy at the end of this description? Okay, I'm arguing against already published stuff. Okay, to give you a little bit more context for this. So Daniel, the lead character of this, he's depicted as an angry young man, easy to resort to violence, even against authority figures like cops. Speaking of cops, the cop in this one, the deputy sheriff in this one, he is your stereotypical bad cop. So, there you go. So he, like the description said, Daniel receives a letter requesting his presence in Stillwater. So he and his best friend go. Again, a best friend situation, which I actually like this best friend. When they arrive, they see a young boy fall off the roof of a nearby building, and no one seems to care. And that sets up everything in motion, the whole situation that Daniel has to deal with from then on. When Daniel tries to get medical help, the boy stands up and runs out of the doctor's office. Later, after an altercation with Deputy Sheriff Ted, that's the dude, he and his friend are taken outside city limits, and the sheriff threatens to kill Daniel, and he does something else that was a bit surprising. But then a woman arrives saying, "My boy, you're back." And so it turns out this woman is Daniel's mom, who sent Daniel away years ago so he could grow up normally. So now I want to talk about just a few words about the cover to issue 1 and this collection. So I presume what we are seeing here is Daniel as a baby and his mom holding him. And so they're depicted in white on this red cover with this black heart, because the mom, while she has hair, is a skeleton. And so there's this black heart with these tendrils coming out of the heart, and going, all over the place, but really going up to connect to the town of Stillwater. So it's almost like roots, black heart roots, coming out of these figures and connecting to the town of Stillwater. But all of this, Daniel, the mom, there's all these connections to Stillwater, and that's what this story is about. So Daniel is at the center of all this, and I just thought that this cover was, I think maybe when I said I have thoughts, it was really about this cover. Because, like I said, everything revolves around this decision that Daniel's mom made and how it impacts the town and, of course, impacts Daniel. Because now that he's back, the citizens have to, well, the town, I guess, generally, but really the judge in this has to deal with this change of situation. But anyway, I'll get to that in a second. But I just want to say this cover by Perez is just awesome. What a great symbol to show the possibilities for this particular narrative. So I really dug it. Okay. Anyway, like I said, Daniel has to go to the judge who presides over basically everything in town. The judge provides an explanation of sorts to Daniel, which I will provide to you right now. The judge says, "This is a special town. As long as you're within our borders, the borders planted by God, you cannot die. You cannot age. You heal. This is our town's blessing, but with that blessing comes vigilance. God intended for our citizens to receive this gift, this Eden. If others found out, well, it wouldn't be Eden for long, would it?" And so that sets up another confrontation with Daniel. So Daniel bides his time trying to figure out how to leave Stillwater alive, because he does attempt to leave Stillwater, but he is hunted down by either the sheriff or other townsfolk who are like-minded with the deputy sheriff. And so, but then he tries to find allies, and turns out there are some in town besides his mom, who is taken out of the story for a short while as punishment for what she did years and years ago. Okay, so that's where initially I was like, do I really have a lot to say about this book? Is there really that much there? Was I just really overwhelmed by the idea of it, the possibilities, more so than what's actually here? And then I thought some more about it too, and there's some interesting ideas in here. Aside from the Twilight Zone-esque quality, the part where you're immortal if you stay in town and you're not if you don't. So there's a couple of things that I really kind of touched on in here. One is the abuse of power by the judge and his accomplice, Deputy Sheriff Ted, who by the way he's the deputy sheriff. He's not the sheriff. And there's this tension between Ted and his boss. And of course, there's always tension with the judge and just about everybody else. But Deputy Sheriff Ted has his own agenda for the town, which we start to see the beginnings of at the end of this volume. So many of the townsfolk comment how the judge has protected and guided them for years, but there are others, and that's what I was alluding to before, others want a new way of life. And so there's a confrontation between these two factions that in this particular volume does not end well for one side. At least for now. I mean, so how do you, when you cannot die, unless you are taken out of town and dealt with, which we have seen Deputy Sheriff Ted do so. What's the result of that? Do these people just continue to pick away at the judge and the situation, or, something more drastic have to be done? So that's kind of interesting, that whole idea of who controls what in the town and what's going to happen going forward. There's also this other character, the young boy that Daniel saw die in the first issue. He seems to have an agenda of his own, that's an interesting factor. It's not just the quote unquote adults who could potentially change things in this town, because there's a scene between this boy, his name is Galen, and Sheriff Tilson, Ted's boss, who accuses Galen of deliberately falling off the roof in front of Daniel and demands to know why. And then later, Galen is talking to Deputy Ted, who is spying on Daniel up on the roof. And they have this conversation about coffee and why does Ted continue to drink coffee? Because he doesn't get anything out of it because of the way the town rejuvenates your body. Anyway, Galen calls out the sheriff during this conversation, calls him out for being a, quote, controlling dick who thought he could run the town before the day everything changed in Stillwater. And the deputy's response is to shove Galen off the roof. So I kind of think Galen might be a little more instrumental in altering things in the town, more so than the like I said, the quote unquote adults who try to do the same thing during this during the events of this volume. So here, I think this is where I was wondering if I really had much to say about this book, and I realize I've talked more about the plot than anything else. Like I said, it's because I'm more intrigued by Galen and what he's up to, and just generally the politics of this story, and this abuse of power by the judge and his cronies, than I am in Daniel's situation. I really don't care if Daniel escapes or somehow alters events in the town. That's not the point to me. It's how these people who have lived here for I don't know how long. There's a flashback set in 1986, and that's when we see things. The townsfolk have determined that something has changed about their town and themselves, and that's when the judge comes in and basically takes over. So 1986 to now. So that's what's going to happen with the town and the folks who want to change things, and those who want to maintain their power. So that I'm intrigued by that because I see this as a similarity to maybe some current political situations here in the United States. So it's that kind of stuff that really interests me about Stillwater. I will say though, if what we get more of in Volume 2 is more Daniel stuff, I don't know that I would continue after that. But so far, I am willing to continue on with this series. All right. Next up is the Stargirl Spring Break special from DC Comics. This is done by Todd Knock, who is the artist. Jeff Johns is the writer. Hi-Fi did the colors. Rob Lee letters, and editor Andrew Marino. Okay, so this comic is about this Courtney Whitmore, Stargirl. Her spring break plans aren't like your average high schoolers. Instead of hanging out with friends, she's heading out on an adventure with her stepfather, Pat Dugan, aka Stripe, and teaming up with his former team, the Seven Soldiers of Victory. The soldiers are forced to reunite again to unearth the secret eighth soldier of victory, but what other secrets lie buried? And what does it all mean for Courtney's future as Stargirl? Okay, so I originally got this for a couple of reasons. One, I like the holiday type specials that DC puts out. Usually it's around Halloween, and there's also a Christmas one. And then in the spring, they sometimes do Valentine's Day. In this case, they did a spring break special. So I dig that DC does this. I got it because I thought granddaughter Madison would enjoy it, because we watched the first couple episodes of the Stargirl TV series, and I thought she might enjoy reading this. But I also enjoy Stargirl. I've always liked that character ever since she was introduced in, was it the JSA comics? I don't remember. I mean, I know she was in that miniseries that Johns did with I forget the artist now, and then she was introduced into the JSA, and that was my introduction to the character. So anyway, so I got it, not really realizing that the Seven Soldiers of Victory were part of this. So there's that aspect of this newer character and her connection to past characters and the Seven Soldiers of Victory. And just, I really enjoy how Jeff Johns generally ties up DC history together. And so I really enjoyed reading this. In this, there is the Crimson Avenger, who is one of the Seven Soldiers. And what I love about a lot of this is that there's so much history here that I've read that when I first got into comics, I read that issue of or that story in which whatever happened in the Crimson Avenger, which was a backup story in DC Comics Presents number 38. But I read it in one of those DC digests, the best stories of the year digests for 1980 or 81, whenever that came out. So that was my first introduction to the Crimson Avenger, his death. And that exact story plays out here in this Spring Break special. And so this story fleshes out that previous story a little bit. So, because it explains how the Crimson Avenger perished saving his city. And so, they touch back on that original story in this special, though, ends up with the same result. They don't bring back the Crimson Avenger because they already have another Crimson Avenger. So anyway, as for the Seven Soldiers of Victory, I first encountered them in DC Special Blue Ribbon Digest number 11, which had a reprint of JLA number 100. And the Seven Soldiers fight with the Nebula Man is referenced in this Spring Break issue. However, with some new twists, one of which is that Green Arrow and Speedy, who were part of the Seven Soldiers of Victory back then, it is explained in this new continuity that the modern day version of Green Arrow and Speedy were sent back in time for a while by the Clock King, and they had their adventures with the Seven Soldiers before they were then brought back to the present. So that's a great way to tie the two, the present and the past together. I thought that was really cool. Instead of having, alternate versions of, the Green Lantern and Speedy characters as they were back then, because that was the Earth 2 version of those characters, I believe, that were originally part of the Seven Soldiers. Let's see here. There's some other small details that I really liked about this. Like I mentioned the Clock King. He tries to give what he refers to as total vision, I'm not sure, of Green Arrow's timeline to break his mind. And the visual of this that we see is the past Golden Age version, the present version in the middle, and then the future Dark Knight version of Green Arrow with the one arm, all next to each other. And I thought that was really cool. It's incidentally, this is a similar visual that Peter and I talked about in the Legion Project episode 32, which was published in 1987. So here we are now, decades later, and they're still using that same visual to depict different timeline versions of characters. So I thought that was interesting. Wondered if, possibly did Todd Knock happen to read that Legion of Superheroes issue? I'm wondering. And then we get towards the end of this, the setup of the next possible plot involving these characters in the new Stargirl series. And so that is the mentioned character of the Childminder and the character of Wing, who was Crimson Avenger's sidekick, and what the connection between those two are. And I think it's really important that there's a lot of focus on Wing, because Wing was actually the 8th member of the Seven Soldiers of Victory, but for some reason he wasn't counted as, a soldier, probably because he was a minority character, and his significance, his contributions were all but ignored during the course of those stories. Seven Soldiers sounds better than 8 Soldiers of Victory, I guess. And so they just conveniently ignored Wing as a person, as a character in this. So I'm glad that Johns and company are bringing are spotlighting Wing more in this. So I'm curious if they're going to be bringing Wing back in some capacity. And then the issue basically ends with like this. There's four final pages to this, and 3 of these is an epilogue by Johns, Hitch, Sinclair, and Lee, including 2 pages of images from the Golden Age version of the JSA, the Bronze Age version, and the modern version. And so we get this wonderful 2-page spread of those characters. Of note is for the modern version, there are some costume changes that I was not familiar with, including Jay Garrick's Flash, where he has, and this could just be a coloring thing, I'm not sure, but it looks purposeful. It doesn't look like shadow or anything, but it looks like he has black stripes running down the arms of his costume. Alan Scott's Green Lantern is wearing more of a coat, a long coat, instead of his usual shirt, which I think it looks pretty cool. Plus, he's got more of a typical Green Lantern symbol on his chest rather than the lantern that we normally see on his chest. There's also a Wildcat. What's her name? Something Montoya? Or am I confusing her with Renee Montoya? I forget now the Wildcat replacement from DC's Crisis on Infinite Earths, where she was introduced and then promptly kind of shunted away when they decided they wanted Ted Grant to continue as Wildcat, I guess. Anyway, she's here with a slightly different looking costume as well. I could be wrong about this, but Our Man seems to have a different costume, which I don't particularly like, but there you go. But looking forward to more JSA stuff, and I hope that this is yet another indication that we get some more JSA comic books in the future, or at least appearances, right? And then finally, the very final page is done by Fred Hembeck, where it's a Where's Stripesy situation where we see nearly all, just about every JSAer on this beach scene where people are just kind of either splashing in the water or lounging on the beach or just kind of mingling around. And you're supposed to find Stripesy. Well, it's pretty easy to find him, but it was cool to go through here and see who's interacting with whom. In fact, we see the Golden Age version of Our Man putting on sun lotion on Wonder Woman, that's really interesting. Brainwave is talking to Power Girl. Yeah, it's just a lot of fun to look through here and see all these characters. So anyway, you should check that out if you happen to like the JSA. All right, Nightwing number 78 from DC Comics. This is done by Bruno Redondo, does the art. Tom Taylor is the writer. Adriano Lucas did the colors. Wes Abbott did letters. And we have 3 editors, Ben Abernathy, Jessica Chen, and Ben Mures. You all know how much I love Nightwing, the character of Dick Grayson in all his iterations as Robin, as Nightwing, as Batman, as Nightwing. I love the character. I have so many issues of Nightwing, of the various volumes. I did not continue with much of the Nightwing run this volume of Nightwing. After a certain point, I forget when I dropped off. I skipped the entire, except for one issue, because it was issue 75, I think. And with the whole Rick Grayson stuff, it's like, no thanks. Anyway, so I had a decision to make because I basically have switched over to reading trades instead of individual issues. Plus, I have the DC Universe app, and I thought, I'll read Nightwing 78 and decide if I really want to get this in trade. Well, this is the same situation as Radiant Black, where as just basically almost immediately after issue 78 came out, and everybody was talking about how great this looks and what a great story, what a great take. And I kept seeing the covers, the Redondo covers. I'm like, oh my God, I'm missing out. And after reading this first issue, I see now that I made a huge mistake in waiting for the trade. But I pre-ordered the hardcover because I'm not going to wait for a softcover version of this. And I have been actually looking for these issues individually so I can get the beautiful looking covers. In fact, at the time of this recording, I went to stop by a comic shop in Spokane, Washington, and they had the cover to issue 79 with all of the Dick Graysons and his various get-ups as he is climbing up the building with Batgirl poking out of the side of the window. You know, the homage to the Batman 66 TV series. I had to get this. This particular issue. Unfortunately, they really only had a couple other ones, and I really just wanted to get this for this particular cover, but I'm still on the lookout for those Redondo drawn Nightwing covers. So I believe I missed the point where I could get the trade and then order the issues going forward. So now I have to wait for the second trade. So yeah. I've really screwed this up, but anyway, I can read them on the app. I can get the trades. That's fine. I just hope that they include all of the cover images in the trade. So all this is to say, I was very excited to read this, and reading Nightwing number 78 did not disappoint. I love what Redondo, Taylor, and company are doing with this character. So here we go. This is issue number 78, Leaping into the Light, Part 1. And this is the description. Nightwing is back, and his drive to keep Bloodhaven safe has never been stronger. But his adopted city has elected a new mayor with the last name of Zuko. When Nightwing enlists Batgirl's help in investigating the politician bearing the same name as the man who murdered his parents, she unearths details that will shock and fundamentally change the hero. Since I've only read this first issue, I don't know that there was a whole lot that she revealed about Zuko, but there was something that she did do that I'll just touch on here in just a second. But anyway, I loved it. I love this issue. I love this first issue of this new era for my favorite superhero character. It starts off in this flashback. Barbara takes no grief from these entitled asshats that are picking on. I forget who it was now, actually. I think it was Dick Grayson, or maybe Dick Grayson stood up for this other person. Anyway, I forget now, but I love that whole bit. We see the two youngsters interacting already. We see Barbara is fearless and fierce, and I love that about her. I love that Dick Grayson, he doesn't take kindly to these bullies, and then we jump forward and he encounters these more asshats who are basically kicking and I guess trying to kill this dog. And he doesn't like that. So we see that it's a nice setup. In other words, to see what kind of a person, or, this is a good way for the creators here to demonstrate what kind of a person Dick Grayson is. And it rings true to me. So I really like that. So we have that flashback, and then we get this beautiful 2-page spread, the title sequence of Nightwing leaping into the light, figuratively, because he's leaping, and in the background you have all the buildings and the lights, and it's beautiful. It's so beautiful, so cinematic. Bruno Redondo is just killing it on this book. So. And then what I alluded to earlier with Barbara and what she reveals to Dick is that Alfred, and this is probably old news to all of you, but Alfred invested his pay, his money, I don't know, his stock options in Wayne Enterprises. I don't remember the details. Anyway, he himself is or Alfred himself was a millionaire, and now that he's dead, he's passed that along to Dick because he knows that Dick can do some good with it. And that scene of Dick Grayson reading that letter and what Alfred means to him and what Dick meant to Alfred, all that wrapped up together. It was very touching. And quite honestly, had me tearing up a little bit because I miss Alfred so much. But I really, that's one thing I've always wanted more of. And maybe they've done this. There's so many Bat books that I can't keep up with them all. But I've always wanted more about how Alfred is really raised Dick Grayson in a sense. Batman, Bruce is Dick's, father, but given the situation and how distant Batman sometimes can be and has been portrayed, Alfred would seem to be the ersatz father figure in Dick's life. And so I really think that DC has missed some opportunities here to really explore that. And now Alfred's dead. So, and like I said, I'm sure they've touched on this in various ways over the years. I just haven't read everything. So if you know about this stuff, point me in the direction. I want to read those stories. Anyway, I really feel like that Redondo and Taylor, they really get Dick. They really get the character. I love Redondo's art. I've said it's expressive and fluid, and the colors are just exquisite. This whole book is just like the most beautiful package. Everything about it, I love so far. I've read one issue, and I've seen the beautiful covers of other issues. The promise of this book for me as a Nightwing fan, as a Dick Grayson fan, is so huge. And if the DCU app will work correctly, because there's something going on there with the Nightwing issues. I read the first issue and then went back to read it again so that I could start doing my notes. And the damn thing would crash every time I opened up this comic book on the app. And I noticed that Nightwing 78 was put in the wrong order. So if you go to the app and then go look at Nightwing and you see all the issues, you see that number is 78. I think it was right between 64 and 65. And then Nightwing 79, which just came out in the app within the last couple weeks, I think, is also out of sequence. And so I'm hoping that despite that the engineers behind the app have fixed the issues with this. And it wasn't just the app, because I tried to go on my PC using the browser, and it crashed Chrome. So there's something up with the coding for Nightwing 78 on the DCU app, and they better goddamn well fix it so I can read these issues. I'm going to read them on the app, and then I'm going to read the trade when I get it. So here, hopefully in the next month or two. I forget when I pre-ordered that. So anyway, love it, love it, love it. Can't wait to read more Nightwing. Okay, here's the last of the spotlighted books. Killadelphia, Sins of the Father, Volume 1 from Image Comics. This is done art by Jason Sean Alexander, story by Rodney Barnes, Luis NCT. Is that right? Did the color, and Marshall Dillon did the letters. So I remember first seeing this series being solicited, and I thought, vampires? No, thank you. And then, kind of forgot about it. And then my Legion Project co-host, Peter Rios, just had to go and talk about the series on his show, The Daily Rios. And that intrigued me enough to go buy the first volume. And, damn it. That just goes to show you, just another lesson of, don't judge a book by its cover, so to speak. Don't prejudge a comic book, because this was quite entertaining. And so what is this about? So Killadelphia is when a small town beat cop, Jimmy Sangster, returns to his Philadelphia roots to bury his murdered father. He stumbles into a mystery that will lead him down a path of horrors and shake his beliefs to their core. The city that was once the symbol of liberty and freedom has fallen prey to corruption, poverty, unemployment, brutality, and vampires. There's a reason they say you can't go home again. Welcome to Killadelphia, which collects issues 1 through 6. I love the historical angle to it. John Adams is a different kind of founding father in this book, and I don't want to say too much more about that. And along with the family strife between Jimmy and his now dead father, who plays a big role in this. There's also a younger vampire in the story, Tevin, who's tired of old white men taking advantage of others and maintaining the status quo. And you wrap all this together, and it makes for quite an entertaining story. Dead Dad is a vampire. So I'll spoil that for you, because we find that out early on. It's not a big surprise, but I really enjoyed watching him struggle with being a new vampire, and being quite menacing. I love the way that Alexander shows or draws. Alexander and Luis do the colors. How they show the reflective dead eyes of the vampires, kind of like a cat's eyes you could see the reflection of light at night. So that's kind of cool. And Dad is he's struggling with his hunger for blood. So they're trying to deal with this vampire situation in Philadelphia. Like I said, Tevin is part of this, but it's like I said, it's the dad's story and Tevin's story as a former acolyte to a particular character and situation that I find are the most interesting aspects to this. Least interesting to me is ostensibly the main character, Jimmy, the son. And other than, of course, him dealing with his father and their rocky past, I find that interesting. But the whole, I don't know, the Jimmy, how he's dealing with it, and when it comes across a bit juvenile. And then there's this whole relationship thing with Chief Medical Examiner Josie that I did not care for. I don't know. It didn't work for me. I wanted more of Dad Cop and Tevin and what they're doing, as opposed to what Jimmy is doing anywhere, anytime. So anyway, the art works really well for the subject matter. It's kind of what you expect. It's dark and moody with splashes of red here and there. It's a vampire book. Kind of reminds me a bit of stuff I've seen from Ben Templesmith, as well as, and I meant to go actually pull these issues out to see, but my recollection, my probably poor memory, the art also kind of reminds me of Corin Lorimer's and Joanna Lafuente's art on the IDW Millennium series, which was a continuation of Chris Carter's television series from the late 90s that I absolutely love. So anyway, I might be wrong on that one, but so the art does its job for sure, given the subject matter. But kind of like Stillwater, I'm not sure. I have Volume 2, so it intrigued me enough to continue with the series, but I don't know how much longer I will stick with it. So I guess it depends on what happens next, right? Okay, and then finally, I just got a few quick thoughts on some of these other books that I read during the month of September 2021. First of all is Secret Volume 1, which I read digitally. This is one of Jonathan Hickman's books. I need to reread this so I can better understand some of the plot, but I did enjoy the book, probably more so for Hickman's writing of it. So it was kind of a weird story, but I was also a little distracted while I was reading it. I think that's why I say I have to go reread this. Another one is the DC Festival of Heroes, that 100-page super spectacular. When I read that super spectacular. I thought the Monkey King story was the standout part of it. And I've already mentioned in a previous episode that we found out during DC Fandom that the Monkey King was getting a series. So there's a mini-series featuring that character. So I'm pleased that the character that I recognized in the book as a standout character is continuing to get some more attention. So I think that's really cool. The next thing here is the X-Men Unlimited Infinity comic that I read on the Marvel Unlimited app. I liked how the artist used the vertical space as part of the story, with Wolverine, falling and falling and falling for I don't know how many inches of scroll space. But other than that, it wasn't that impressive of a short story featuring Wolverine. I don't know, but anyway, I liked how they made use of the space, which is something that Scott McCloud talks about in one of his books about comic books. There's one thing that I particularly remember about how if you produce a comic book on a web page, there's so much you could do with storytelling involving the space. So, because you're not limited to, whatever, 8.5 by 11. I don't remember exactly the inches for a comic book. I think I should after all these years of reading them, but I don't. But you're not limited by that page boundary, the printed page boundary. And so I like how in this X-Men Unlimited book or a comic that they decide to play around with that. And then finally, New Mutants by Ed Brisson, Volume 1, which is how the volume titles itself. This collects issues 3 through 4, 6, and 8 through 12. So I got this because I wanted to read what the other New Mutants were doing, while the New Mutants in the first volume. See, this is part of the reason I'm talking about this. What they were doing in space. And so we got this story, and I quite enjoyed that. In fact, I think there was a lot more stakes to that collection of stories than what we got in the other book, in the other New Mutants volume. However, so this is where I get on my soapbox a little bit. So the New Mutants, so they're both volume 1s. So we have the New Mutants volume 1 with them in space, and I forget now who the creators are in that and how it was billed. I probably should have looked that up. But this particular one, like I said, is New Mutants Volume 1 by Ed Brisson, the writer. And so if you recall, when I first mentioned this, I said that when I read this, I mentioned it was by Brisson, Flaviano, and Failla. And so those are the artists along with Brisson. And so it really bugs me that we get a lot of those things. And I just did it with Jonathan Hickman, right? With Secret, because I don't remember who the artist is. I have to look that up. We're so predisposed to who the writer is, and the publishers are doing the same thing. And there was just on Twitter not too long ago, at the time as I record this, there was a discussion about how someone is adapting Jodorowsky's and Mobius's The Inkle, and everybody was talking about it, or at least the publications that were talking about it were talking about Jodorowsky and not Mobius. And so that just highlighted to me this whole thing about with Ed Brisson. Nothing against Ed Brisson. It's not the writer's fault how the publisher decides to package these collections and promote these collections. But which is why, if you've noticed this episode, I started referring to the artist first and then the writer, because it's all a collaboration. All of these people involved, all the names that I've read for each and every one of these books that I've spotlighted, this, I'm preaching to the choir. They are the ones who made this book, not the writer, not just the writer. So this is something that I have long been thinking about doing as I talk about the creators of these books, where I was going to start putting the artists first. And so that's what I'm going to do from now on. Anyway, so that is, I'll get off my soapbox now. Well, okay, one more thing. I touched on this, but, New Mutants Volume 1, there's 2 New Mutants Volume 1s. Volumes 1. That's just confusing. How is that not confusing to the uninitiated? Dumb. It's dumb. Okay. Off the soapbox for sure now. And that's the end of the episode, folks. All right. Let me know what you think about the books that I spotlighted here. And in fact, if there are any of the books that I did not specifically talk about that you would enjoy my thoughts on, please let me know. I could come back to any of these books that I have been not specifically spotlighting in these either pull list reviews or comic chats that I've been doing recently. So let me know if there's any of those that you would like me to talk more about. I would gladly do so. And you can let me know that by emailing me at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can also converse with me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram at longboxreview. Please visit longboxreview.com where this episode will be posted, along with things that I'm doing with the 52 series, a weekly post there. And I got to start thinking about what I'm going to do next year to fill that space as well. And finally, don't forget, I have some comic books that I'm trying to sell. So if you go to the website and see that sticky post, you can find out what books are on my list that I'm trying to get rid of. And I'm selling them really cheap so I can get them out of my office, because I have officially run out of space for my comic books, and I really need to do something about that. Decisions need to be made. All right. With that, I leave you. Thanks for listening. Take care, and I will talk to you later. Bye-bye.